While my sibling enjoyed a life of luxury upstairs, I was confined to the basement, labeled as unstable by my own parents. Years later, when they lost everything and came to me in tears, I simply pointed out that the basement was always the place for those deemed unfit by them. I never imagined that the dank, dim corridors of a basement could foster a sense of identity so resilient that it would come to define me. Growing up, the world above was a realm of glistening luxury and effortless charm, a domain my sibling inhabited with an ease that I could only envy from afar. Our house was split in more ways than one. While my brother's life unfolded in a sunlit penthouse of privilege, I was relegated to the subterranean confines of a cold, musty basement, a place my own parents deemed unstable and unworthy of the light. I remember the echo of their dismissive voices as if they were reciting a litany of failures every time they mentioned my name, a constant reminder that I was an anomaly, a misfit in a family where perfection was the only acceptable currency. In Nolaki, those early years, the basement became both my prison and my sanctuary. The concrete walls, splintered by time and neglect, whispered secrets of despair and isolation, yet they also cradled my most private dreams. By day, I would watch through a narrow, grimy window as my sibling enjoyed laughter, warmth, and all the trappings of a life untouched by the burden of constant criticism. The upstairs world was filled with soft music, polished furniture, and the scent of fresh linen, symbols of a life that seemed to have been designed for beauty and ease. Meanwhile, I was left to navigate a labyrinth of shadow and silence, where every drip of water and scrape of floorboard reminded me of my supposed inadequacy. I would often lie awake at night, the only light coming from a flickering bulb that cast dancing shadows across peeling walls, and wonder what I had done to deserve such a fate. Was it something in the way I spoke, a quirk in my laugh, or the timidity in my eyes that convinced my parents that I was unstable? Their judgment, delivered in sharp, indifferent tones, was a constant companion. It seeped into my soul and colored every memory, every moment of fleeting joy. I began to internalize the belief that I was inherently flawed, a defect in a family that valued perfection above all else. And yet, as I grew older, that very isolation nurtured in me a secret strength, a determination to find beauty in the horror, darkness and meaning in the silence. I remember one particularly searing afternoon when the oppressive heat of summer seemed to press against the walls of our home. My sibling was upstairs laughing with friends in a sun-dappled living room filled with the clink of glasses and the hum of conversation. Down in the basement, I sat cross-legged on a threadbare rug, poring over tattered books and scribbling in a battered notebook. In that moment, I resolved that I would not allow the world's cruel labels to define me. If they saw me as unstable, then perhaps it was the world that was unbalanced, incapable of understanding the intricate beauty of imperfection. That day marked the beginning of a quiet rebellion. I started to notice that the darkness in the basement was not merely a sign of neglect, but a canvas upon which I could project my innermost thoughts and wildest dreams. I would spend hours mapping out constellations on the cracked ceiling, each star a silent testament to the resilience that I was slowly building. The basement, in all its dismal glory, became my secret studio, my laboratory of introspection, where I learned that true strength is often forged in the crucible of adversity. I found solace in the words of poets and philosophers whose verses and musings resonated with my own sense of displacement. Their words became the echo of a truth I was only beginning to understand, that the labels imposed by others could never diminish the value of a soul that dared to dream differently. As the years rolled by, the contrast between the worlds upstairs and below became ever more pronounced. My siblings' existence seemed to be a never-ending carousel of indulgence and effortless success, a life punctuated by accolades and effortless charm. Every family gathering was a stark reminder of that divide. While my sibling basked in the glow of admiration and effortless ease, I lingered in the shadows, a silent observer of a life I had been denied. It was during these moments of solitude that I started to piece together the fragments of my identity, slowly realizing that the basement, with all its gloom and abandonment, had also gifted me with a clarity of vision that was unattainable in the glittering distractions of the world above. The isolation, once a source of acute pain, began to crystallize into something almost tangible, a quiet fortitude, a determination to redefine the meaning of stability. I immersed myself in the stories of those who had been cast aside, whose lives had taken unexpected turns in the face of relentless adversity. In the hushed hours of the night, while the rest of the world slept, I would write feverishly about the paradoxes of life, how sometimes the very places we are shunned become the crucibles of our greatest triumphs. Every line I wrote was a quiet act of defiance, a reminder that being labeled unstable was less a condemnation of my character and more a reflection of the flawed expectations imposed by others. In that cold, neglected space, I began to see beauty in the imperfections. The peeling paint became a mosaic of resilience, the echoing drips of water, a metronome marking the steady beat of a heart that refused to surrender. I learned to listen to the silence, to find meaning in the stillness that pervaded every corner of the basement. It was there, in that unlikeliest of havens, that I forged an identity that was both raw and unyielding, a self-made strength that would one day set the stage for a reckoning long overdue. The seeds of change were sown in those formative years, nurtured by the very neglect that had once threatened to break me. I started to question the narratives that had been force-fed to me, that stability was synonymous with conformity, that love was measured by the brightness of one's surroundings. I began to see that the basement, with its darkened corners and echoing silence, held a kind of truth, a reminder that sometimes the most profound revelations come from the depths of despair. Even as the walls closed in and the cold seeped into my bones, I could feel a spark within me that refused to be extinguished. I began to dream of a future where I would reclaim my worth, where the scars of my past would be transformed into badges of honor rather than symbols of shame. Those early years of isolation, filled with quiet desperation and hidden wonders, laid the groundwork for a transformation that would eventually upend everything I once believed about myself and my family. Little did I know that the seeds of resilience planted in that basement would one day bloom into a force strong enough to challenge even the deepest wounds of abandonment. And as I continued to write my story in the silence of that neglected space, a part of me already knew that destiny had a way of returning to those who once cast them aside. In the dim light of a cold, rainy night, the sound of hesitant footsteps crept up the creaking stairs, a sound that carried with it the weight of years spent hiding from a world that had once rejected me. It was then that the inevitable happened. My parents, once so sure of their superiority, appeared at the threshold of my sanctuary with tear-stained faces and voices trembling with regret. Their eyes, wide with disbelief, searched mine for the warmth of forgiveness they had long assumed was owed to them. I met their desperate gaze with an unwavering calm, the years of isolation and self-discovery lending my words a gravitas they could no longer dismiss. "This," I said, gesturing to the very space that had sheltered me in my darkest hours, "has always been the place for those you deemed unfit, a refuge for the broken, the unstable, and the misunderstood." There was no dramatic outburst, no cathartic release of anger. Instead, my tone was measured, almost academic, as I recounted the long, silent journey I had taken in that basement. A journey that transformed every cold, cracked wall and every echoing drip of water into a mosaic of resilience. I reminded them that the basement, for all its abandonment, had become a crucible where I forged an identity unbound by the fickle standards of the world above. Their opulent life, filled with superficial accolades and empty triumphs, had never truly nurtured a soul. It had only masked vulnerabilities beneath layers of glittering pretense. And in that moment of reckoning, as their sorrowful murmurs faded into the oppressive silence, I knew that the power to define my worth had always resided in the very darkness they had tried to hide. I led them slowly through the labyrinthine corridors of my refuge, where every step evoked memories of whispered secrets and quiet rebellions. The basement was no longer merely a place of exile. It was a living testament to the strength born of solitude. Along the peeling walls, I recalled each scar and every hidden corner where I had discovered a fragment of truth. I spoke of nights spent poring over tattered books and scribbling feverish thoughts in a battered notebook, of mapping out constellations on cracked ceilings that represented the dreams I dared to nurture in secret. As I retraced the journey of my transformation, their tearful silence spoke volumes, a bitter acknowledgement that the opulent world they had created above was built on fragile, unsustainable illusions. In that charged atmosphere, the basement transformed from a symbol of rejection into an arena of quiet vindication. The very elements of decay, the chipped paint, the rusted pipes, the unyielding cold, became emblems of the raw, unadulterated reality that had set me free. I explained that while they had clung to their illusions of stability and perfection, I had learned that true strength is not measured by the brightness of one's surroundings, but by the authenticity of one's soul. Their grand design had always been a facade, a glittering mirage meant to distract from the deep, unspoken truth that vulnerability and imperfection were the true hallmarks of a life fully lived. As the night deepened and the storm outside subsided, into a gentle, almost melancholic drizzle, a profound shift took place, not just in the room but within me. I no longer felt the weight of their disdain or the sting of their neglect. Instead, I embraced a liberating sense of self-possession, a calm conviction that the basement, with all its stark realities, was a sanctuary where I had learned to cherish every imperfection. I recounted the countless evenings spent in solitude, where I had come to understand that the pain of isolation was not a curse, but the raw material from which I had sculpted my identity. In that silent communion with my own vulnerability, I had discovered a depth of resilience that no amount of luxury could ever replicate. I watched as their eyes, heavy with regret and disbelief, flickered with the faintest glimmer of understanding. They realized, perhaps too late, that the values they had held so dear, wealth, status, the outward sheen of success, were hollow constructs that crumbled in the face of life's true challenges. The basement had become a repository for the discarded dreams and wounded hopes of those like me, and in that space I had reclaimed a dignity that they had never understood. I spoke of how the isolation, once a source of searing pain, had evolved into a profound source of insight, a lens through which I saw the world with stark clarity and unyielding honesty. In the aftermath of our encounter, the dynamics of our fractured family began to shift in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. My parents, stripped of their former arrogance, retreated into a reflective silence, while I continued to nurture the sanctuary that had given me new meaning. I transformed the basement into a haven for those who, like me, had been relegated to the fringes of a society that prized conformity over authenticity. Here, in the subdued glow of a solitary lamp and the gentle hum of shared stories, we celebrated the beauty of being different. It was a place where scars were worn not as badges of shame, but as symbols of survival, a reminder that the deepest wounds could yield the richest reservoirs of strength. I hosted nights of storytelling, where voices that had long been silenced by fear found the courage to share their truths. In the murmurs of laughter and the soft cadence of confessions, the basement resonated with a raw, unfiltered energy, a collective affirmation that even in the depths of despair, there could be light. Every tale of loss and redemption, every whispered admission of vulnerability reinforced the unassailable truth that the path to self-acceptance was paved with the very fragments of pain we had once tried to hide. The basement had, paradoxically, become a beacon for those searching for authenticity in a world obsessed with surface-level perfection. Now, as I sit in the quiet aftermath of that fateful night, I realize that the journey I embarked upon in the darkness was not one of mere survival, but of profound transformation. I have come to understand that the labels imposed by others are nothing more than echoes of their own limitations. The basement, once a prison of neglect, has evolved into a sanctuary of truth, a place where the broken pieces of our past are carefully reassembled into a mosaic of resilience. I stand as living proof that true stability is not a product of external validation, but a state of inner equilibrium forged through hardship, introspection, and the unwavering courage to embrace one's true self. To anyone who has ever felt consigned to the shadows, I offer this simple truth. In the depths of darkness, there lies an unexpected brilliance, a hidden strength that emerges when you dare to confront the very things that once held you captive. The basement taught me that while the world above may dazzle with its superficial splendor, it is in the unvarnished reality of our struggles that we find the essence of who we truly are. As the storm gave way to a quiet, resolute calm, I knew that my journey was far from over. Each step forward was a testament to the enduring power of authenticity, a reminder that even in a world built on fragile illusions, the light of genuine self-acceptance burns brighter than any manufactured glow. In that profound silence, with the ghosts of the past and the hope of tomorrow intertwined, I embraced the full measure of my existence. The basement, in all its stark simplicity, had been the crucible in which I had been remade. And as I look back on the years of isolation and defiance, I see not a tale of sorrow, but one of unexpected triumph, a journey that transformed what was once a symbol of rejection into the very foundation of a life defined by resilience, authenticity, and the courage to live in the light of one's own truth.